and welcome back to Analog Slop, where two music industry lifers revisit the enemy and melody maker of their youth, which in our case is the 90s. We're exploring artists we discovered as wide-eyed teenagers, only to disown as sneering 20-somethings. Now, unshackled from our hipster baggage, we dive deep into the pre-digital age to look back on a time when music news came but once a week. My name is Graham Best. I've worked in music publishing and music tech for over 20 years.
And my name is Adam Bushell. I've been a music supervisor for 20 years.
Each week, one of us will read the NME, one of us will read the Melody Maker, and we will pick out the most interesting stories and discuss them.
This week is the 12th of June, 1999. Marilyn Manson outs himself. Melody Maker ranks the coolest people in indie. Fridge into the next 10 years with their second album. And Gay Dad arrive on a wave of hype and skepticism. Welcome. It is the 12th of June, 1999. This week, I have the NME. Graham has the Melody Maker. On the cover of this week's NME is a close-up of Liam Gallagher's face overlaid with coloured blocks. Bit of an ironic image as Britpop is very much in the rearview mirror and obscured by the present. There is no lead article teased. Instead, they are drawing attention to their cover-mounted CD, which they are calling the greatest Glasto CD ever, which has a collection of live recordings from Glastonbury of different bands. Above the logo, they reference their main news story, which is about Marilyn Manson and the Columbine shooting. The header, "It's a witch hunt. Marilyn Manson takes on his critics." To the right of that, they tease their lead gig review, which is a Kosovo benefit concert with the header, "Bittersweet Sympathy. Noel honours the Verve at Kosovo benefit." The enemy has shrunk. It is now a smaller size. It's a scant 56 pages, and costs £1.10. The bands in On are Big Leaves and the experimental pop band. There's a 2-page advert for the next 3 weeks of the NME. Each issue will feature pre- and post-Glastonbury coverage and Glastonbury-themed giveaways. There's just Glastonbury madness. It's a very odd time because the features they have are on the bands Regular Fries, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sebado, and Fridge. None of those bands get more than 2 pages. Red Hot Chili Peppers, who are about to release Californication, get a page, and Fridge get half a page. Lead live review is the Kosovo Aid Benefit, which features acoustic sets from Paul Weller, Ray Davies, Kelly Jones from Stereophonics, and Noel Gallagher. They're praised for doing something charitable for a worthy cause, but they are harangued for being dad rock dullards, as you could imagine. The lead album review is Gorilla by Super Furry Animals, which is their third album. It's reviewed by James Oldham, and he gives it a 9 out of 10. I don't know if I'd give it a 9 out of 10, but I re-listened to it, and I think it easily has a place in some kind of top 25 Creation Records albums. I think you could stick that. Graham, you may remember a few weeks back, you viciously accused me of being a Super Furry Animals fan.
I sure did.
I denied it. And then getting about 15 minutes through this album, I realised I'd, of course, heard it before and at some point had owned it. And I think at some point in the early aughts, there must have been some mid-price campaign for Super Furry Animals, and I've filled the holes in their discography that I had. And cut to you leafing through my CDs sneerily at some point in the early aughts, thinking, wow, this guy really can't let go of the Super Furry Animals. So, yeah, I guess I owe you an apology. I listened to the album twice. I thought it was really good. It's a real kind of genre mishmash, punk, calypso, dance music, and kind of heavy Smile era Beach Boys vibe. Also, I wanted to say about them is that one of the things that you found so objectionable about them was that what you defined as their wackiness. And on re-listen, I think what you call wacky, I think they would define as kind of trippy or psychedelic. I think surreal is the word I would use for them.
I think it's a thin line between surreal and wacky.
Well, I was magnanimous enough to offer you an apology. It really feels like the least you can do to... But no, you had to stick the boot in one more time.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, our foremost Super Furry Animals defender.
Well, anyway, let's see how they progress. I haven't heard their second album in a long time, so maybe I could revert to that. But the album fits in quite well with this new kind of post Britpop sound, this kind of genre mangling post indie. I wrote down the bands Regular Fries, Campag Velocet, Gomez, Low Fidelity All Stars, Delicota, and of course the Beta Band. So it's kind of anti Britpop kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's safe to say there's no scene that emerged after Britpop where the enemy has been able to plant its flag.
God, they've tried.
Yeah, but those bands feel like they're kind of a piece. Would you kind of agree? And they feel kind of this landscape.
Yeah, I think they're all on a similar spectrum, but it's quite a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
There's an appreciation of hip hop.
Mm,
There's a bit of folk and country in there.
yep.
There's like a bit of a suspicion of the anthemic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's all quite. Yeah, you're right. That's a good suspicion. Anthemic is good. It's all quite low energy. You could say flat, actually, in a lot of cases. But
I mean, it's funny when you were reading out that list of names, there was some that I kind of felt my face wrinkling at. And then you said Delicata, and I just remembered how wonderful The Rock is as a single.
yeah, no, The Rock is amazing. It's now on DSPs. Everybody, go check out The Rock by
Oh,
Delicota.
hell yeah. That is definitely coming up on an Instagram reel.
It's amazing. Yeah, let's not talk about The Rock by Delicata because we'll be here all day. So I just want to say, other reviews of note, Schizophonic by Jerry Halliwell, which is a debut album. It gets a 4.
Has that got It's Raining Men on it?
No, it's Raining Men is from the Bridget Jones's Diary soundtrack.
Have we talked about this before?
No, I have a connection to that film, a professional connection. But that really is a story for another time, and it's in another decade. So,
Hold tight for the Delicata Bridget Jones Diary double episode.
coming soon. Yeah, other reviews, Synchronized by Jamiroquai, number 6. And you may roll your eyes at this, Graham, but I wanted to pull it out. Also, Rest Proof Clockwork by Plaid, which gets a 7, which is a very good album in parts and hasn't aged great in other parts. You should check that out. It's good. Single of the week is Race for the Prize by the Flaming Lips. Fuck yeah.
Good song.
Absolutely. Lastly, I just want to say before we get on to the Melody Maker, half the letters page is given over to a debate about the merits of gay dad. Apparently, Enemy devoted much of an early issue to the same topic, where enemy writers took a for or against argument. Graham, Melody Maker, what's going on?
So I think when we looked at 1998, a few episodes back, you had the responsibility of steering us through the Melody Maker, and it was an exceptionally slim package. I think the highlights were an obscure football song that united Ian McCulloch of Echo and the Bunnymen with the Spice Girls, and some bafflingly straight ahead coverage of Bewitched. So in 1999, I think it's fair to say that Melody Maker is still having this kind of slow, lingering death. It's still proceeding at this glacial pace. Worth pointing out, we're still 2.5 years away from the final issue of Melody Maker in December 2001. So that glacial pace will be maintained. But in comparison to the 1998 episode, it's hard to avoid the sense that the Melody Maker is on more stable ground. It might not necessarily be interesting ground, but it has figured out what its stool is. I would say that that stool is predominantly a very conservative indie rock space. So the front page, and I seem to get these issues a lot, is this kind of comically vacuous listicle, which is the coolest people in rock 1999.
I so hope you chose that. So hope we're doing a deep dive on the coolest people in rock.
We're doing a dive on it, but we're doing a dive in a manner that I would not normally subscribe to. So you can look forward to that. There's very little supporting information on the cover. There's the opportunity to win Glastonbury tickets. There's a free CD. Festival's 99, and there is the cover price, which is still below £1 at 95p. You know, Melody Maker know what they're trying to do here. They are trying to undercut the enemy. There are 48 pages, less than a quid, less than 50 pages.
Less than interesting.
That too. There's a few notable items popping up in the news section I want to rattle through quickly. The same Kosovo benefit gig is covered as in the NME, but any editorializing is kind of removed from it. There are no value judgments on the performance. It's just Noel Gallagher pops up and plays an acoustic version of LeVerve's Bittersweet Symphony, also playing Stereophonics, Travis, Ray Davies of the Kinks, and recurring theme of this podcast, Paul Weller. In other news, probably at kind of two opposite poles of the Melody Makers' comfort zone in this period. First up, you have Manic Street Preachers announcing the fourth single from their enormous This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours album. That single is Tsunami, and that album had briefly made them, I would argue by default, the biggest band in the UK for a short period of time. Oasis were between albums after the kind of anticlimax of Be Here Now. The Verve had split up yet again after the success of Urban Hymns, and Radiohead were in the studio ripping off Warp and Scam acts.
Ooh, Graham.
I knew you'd take the bait. Satisfying.
Actually, we'll be circling back to this.
Oh, really? Interesting. Anyway, in light of this new single, the Melody Maker asks a professor of sociology at the London School of Economics to assess the video, which is the most Manic Street Preachers thing imaginable. And he labels the video both clever and thoughtful, which is more than can be said for the insight he provides. At the opposite end of the Melody Makers' comfort zone, they attend a press conference Lauryn Hill gives with her Miseducational Lauryn Hill tour sponsor, Levi's. And the Melody Maker, being the Melody Maker in 1999, asks with a straight face if the sponsorship of her shows might compromise her street image, whatever that is.
Christ.
To Lauryn Hill's credit, she responds with a pretty straightforward answer and just talks about the economics of large-scale touring. And the purpose of a sponsor being involved is to help fund shows with consistently high production values. Kind of aside from this, I'm not sure if this is just general stats and facts, or if this is the Melody Maker trying to point out like kind of how this is big pop music. But the article highlights that Miseducation of the Lauryn Hill album is double platinum in the UK at this point, possibly less than a year after release. I had never really considered that album to be such a big deal in the UK. I knew the singles were big, but as an album, it struck me as something that maybe hadn't crossed over in that way. More for me.
There are two things to say about that. Firstly, I remember that being huge because all the singles on it were played, the videos for them were played endlessly on MTV. I could tell you as somebody with teenage children that that album is like huge for young people. It's such a big
I
deal.
had picked up on that.
It's totemic. In fact, I was on holiday somewhere in Europe a few years ago, and I noticed the waiter serving us had a Lauryn Hill tattoo on the back of his leg.
That's fascinating. Have you listened to it recently?
No, I haven't, and I know it's coming. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure we will at some point tackle it. She actually got quite like she gets like a half-page live review in the NME this week.
Yeah, I'll hold off on my thoughts until it inevitably turns up. But it's funny to me that that album is on such a pedestal compared to similar albums released in the same time period.
Yeah, well, I think I'd like to give it another go and reevaluate it with kind of 21st century ears.
To be clear, I'm not saying it's shit. I'm just saying that it's odd to me that that's the one that gets highlighted. Finally, some other acts making various appearances in Melody Maker this week that I will not be covering in detail. Super Furry Animals also make an appearance here with a Q&A with Gruff Rhys. Symposium pop up,
Wow.
which I was not expecting for summer '99. I thought that ship had sailed. Ones to watch in the electronic space this week are the Micronauts, who've been busy remixing the likes of the Chemical Brothers and so on. Finally, because it's 1999, Mark and Lard also have a Q&A, the Shire Horses.
For you, my dear sister, holding on to me forever. Disco dancing with the
So, the first thing I want to talk about this week is the lead news item, which I mentioned was highlighted on the cover of the NME, which is Marilyn Manson and the recent Columbine shooting.
Well, this shouldn't be controversial.
We find US youth culture having an end of history moment. Big political battles feel over, rebellion has been absorbed by the market, and transgression is sold as entertainment.
You've been stealing Bobby Gillespie's lyric book again, haven't you?
Listen, uh, you'll get your chance. The lead news piece this week is about a statement Marilyn Manson has released about the recent shooting at Columbine. The statement was released through the magazine Rolling Stone via their print edition and website. The NME had previously devoted a cover to this issue on the 1st of the 5th, 1999. When I say this issue, I mean the issue of Marilyn Manson's association with the Columbine shootings. So, just to remind everyone, in late April of 1999, there's a shooting at a school in Columbine committed by 2 students that kills 15 people. The media is quick to point the finger at the current culture of the day as an explanation for what happened. Among those in the firing line is Marilyn Manson, frontman for the metal, I'm going to say, band of the same name. This is less about facts. There's no evidence that the shooters were Manson fans, as it is about symbolic usefulness, let's say. Marilyn Manson are among a cadre of US artists around in the late 90s whose stock in trade, from the outside at least, is an apathetic, anti-everything nihilism. I'm thinking specifically here of Marilyn Manson, Eminem, and Limp Bizkit. Anyone you want to throw in there, Graham? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I think Marilyn Manson, like there's a big shock rock aspect in there, but they do also have links to the kind of the industrial metal scene
Ah, you're talking it from a genre perspective.
from a genre perspective, but also from that kind of super nihilistic kind of fuck everything attitude. I think the seeds of that are sown kind of further back in the 90s. It just comes to full bloom, to torture this metaphor more, by 1999.
They definitely took Trent Reznor's sleazy edgelord thing to the next level. That's for sure.
If you look at Nine Inch Nails' video for Closer, it's like, oh yeah, that's like a work in progress Marilyn Manson thing.
Absolutely. Well, we'll kind of talk a bit about the evolution of their music and their associations with Trent Reznor in a second. Just back to the kind of enemy of it all. By 1999, the enemy's in a bit of a weird bind. It wants a homegrown scene it can narrate week by week, like we were talking about earlier, with access, feuds, quotes, and evolution. But UK guitar culture is fragmented, post-peak, and the most eventful pop culture, I would say, at this time is increasingly American. And it is MTV, internet virality is starting, imported controversy. That it is arm's length from where the NME are. Would you agree with that?
I consider us too old for it, but it's easy to miss how huge new metal was. So Korn have kind of like established the sort of the foundations, and then Limp Bizkit kind of throw out any of the sort of the ambiguity around it, like and go full jock.
Well, again, this is something we're gonna get into, but back a bit to the NME. So the paper ends up having to cover these huge US acts, Manson, Eminem, new metal, as you said, who A, they don't need the NME. B, they often don't do much UK press, and C, they arrive kind of as finished brands. Do you know what I mean? Rather than scenes the NME can midwife.
Yeah, yeah. There's no myth making to be done on the enemy's part.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the enemy's power was always scene building, and there isn't a scene really. So Manson and Eminem are on the same label, so Interscope. This is Jimmy Iovine's label. In the late 90s, Interscope would excel at commodifying outrage and selling it to the teenagers of the world. They were tremendously successful at this. What's often shocking, it was hard then as it is now to argue that this music really stood for anything. By the late 90s, outrage and rebellion have been absorbed by the market. No one is pretending anymore that these are not revenue streams, basically. I know that sounds a bit cynical, but it was a cynical time. There was no pretense about this. It was all shock with not much intellectual content. Even Manson, which we'll kind of go on to talk about. Manson at this point have had 4 significant releases. The debut album, Portrait of an American Family from 1994, which, as you mentioned, Graham, was produced by Trent Reznor and released on his Nothing Records, which is a subsidiary of Interscope. They then follow this with the Smells Like Children EP, which is kind of a collection of skits and covers. This is significant because it includes a cover of Sweet Dreams Are Made of This by the Eurythmics, which would propel them to stardom. Then comes Antichrist Superstar in 1996, which pushes them over the top. Huge MTV singles, 7 million sales worldwide on that album.
Wow, I did not appreciate that sold that big. I remember the aesthetic just being like kinda, yeah, like Alice Cooper goes grindcore.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of describing it. And then lastly, there's Mechanical Animals in 1998, which is the one where he's kind of looking very androgynous on the cover, if you remember that, with the red hair.
Yeah, it's like the David Bowie aping.
Exactly. It's kind of a electro goth southern rock record. Believe it or not, I actually listened to all 4 of those, in the last week. They're very enjoyable, highly effective, fun records. I had only heard the singles from the last 2 albums that I just mentioned, and of course, the cover of Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. Graham, you were reading Kerrang! In the early 90s. I'm very interested if you were aware of that first album and their entrance onto the quote unquote metal scene, and also interested in if you can remember how it was reported in the UK.
Yes, funnily enough, I can. I was having a bit of a Nine Inch Nails moment off the back of them at Woodstock '94. So I was kind of following what Nine Inch Nails were up to around that time.
Yeah.
For that reason, I think that was the main reason Kerrang! Covered the debut album. I think I gave it a fairly middling review. I've got a feeling there was a UK show, potentially at like somewhere like the Borderline or of another like real kind of like limited capacity industry showcase sort of venue. It didn't really interest me because it was so theatrical. I was aware it was happening, but I think the musical path I was on at that point was already a bit embarrassed about a lot of metal stuff or a lot of metal culture and aesthetics. So something like Marilyn Manson coming along, I was just like, no, 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 that's the exact opposite direction. Like I think I'm going in.
Yeah, it definitely didn't seem like your sort of thing, but for my part, I had no idea they even existed until, I mean, Manson, he's dead until it starts popping up in like he is literally is in like a David Lynch film, and there's like the music videos were just pretty ubiquitous on MTV too. So
I'm conscious of probably just repeating what you've already said, but I do have a vivid memory around that 98, 99 period of kind of the enemy in particular, like really trying to kind of justify its coverage of them and trying to intellectualize it to a degree that wasn't really there.
I remember how Manson was perceived at the time by older people and critics. Those not horrified were quick to praise him for his thoughtful, well thought out comments. They credited him for not just wanting to shock, but having something to say. There's a quote from Manson's statement in the article that sums up how I personally thought of him at the time, where he says, "I've always tried to let people know it's okay or better if you don't fit in with the program." This is kind of king of the freaks thing, right? It's like he's sympathetic to those cast aside by mainstream society, like a defender of misfits. And at the time, these statements to me felt very sincere. Here's the thing, though. Last week, I read his book. Do you know about this?
The question I have to ask with dread is when was it published?
So the book was published in 1998.
Oh, so before perceptions changed.
So in 1998, he releases an autobiography called The Long Hard Road Out of Hell. This book, as you would imagine, documents his well publicized traumatic childhood, his time at an extreme Christian school, his abuse at the hands of his father, and generally society around him. But Manson seems more interested in documenting all the transgressive sexual acts he's taken part in. This book is more kind of like Hammer of the Gods, The Dirt, or Cocksucker Blues than kind of a treatise on how, right wing Christian America created a monster. He repeatedly uses demeaning, dehumanizing language to describe women. He reads like Trump talking to reporters now, and he sounds like Trump on the bus talking to Billy Bush in the Access Hollywood tapes. It's essentially sex is like all about humiliation and cruelty. And I'm not kink shaming. I'm not talking about BDSM, although there is a lot of that. I mean, the girls he and his band sleep with are paraded as these kind of vacuous morons who he kind of describes, physical imperfections first. It's not compassionate rebellion. It's like this mean-spirited transgression.
Sounds a really fucking depressing piece of research.
Yeah, it really was. So, as I said, even though he's kind of presented himself as this kind of king of the freaks, he's a gatekeeper essentially. He's rebuilding hierarchy within his scene. Empathy is normie, disdain is authenticity. You said it earlier in an episode, a few episodes back. You talked about that kind of 90s anti PC trope of I hate everyone, so it's okay. There's a lot of that in there. Surely someone at the enemy has read this book by 1999. He doesn't really fit the enemy's worldview. Bit back to what you were saying about stretching him to kind of to fit their terms, which you might characterize their worldview as this kind of youth culture as meaningful, transgression as critique, and outsider identity as basically progressive. There's a discomforting misalignment here. So the enemy solves the discomfort by leaning into a familiar frame. He's a scapegoat. He's eloquent. He represents the misunderstood outsider. I just found it quite staggering, having read the book, how you talked about this kind of jock, limp biscuit kind of thing. That is what it is. I had this idea of him in my head. I do understand that he's had other controversies in later in life to do with his relationship with women. What I wasn't expecting in an autobiography is to have it kind of laid bare in a, like, "Check this out, lads," kind of way. Do you know what I mean? It's really, really awful, to be honest.
Like, I'm kind of like, I'm not surprised that that autobiography has that sort of shit in it. I think the power dynamics around ostensibly outsider artists are always really fucking murky.
To be honest, he gets off on that. There's a lot of that in the book. But yeah, it kinda goes above and beyond that. I mean, it's like 70% of the book is this stuff.
Mhm.
It's quite staggering. Like, it's him doing coke and, like, having sex with groupies who he thinks are idiots, basically, and he's, like, really relishing talking about it. If he's not plotting to kill ex-girlfriends, like, literally going out to murder them and then, getting kind of spooked by something and deciding maybe he's not gonna do it.
Wow. uh, it's fucking miserable, isn't it? Like I kind of, I'd wondered where you were going with this at the start
Yeah.
because you were kind of keeping your powder dry.
Yeah.
I was squirming in my seat, just like, we really need to address the fact that he's been outed as a terrible fucking human being.
Yeah, yeah.
But the sort of the kind of mic drop moment is that he outed himself as a fucking terrible human being like over 25 years ago. It's just that no one was paying attention.
Yeah, the age of 28, just writing a book like this. It may be a more interesting way of approaching this would have been to look at why a book like this would be kind of unquestioned or who had questioned it at the time. But as I say, I'm more interested, within the purview of our podcast of how the enemy relates to all this and where it fits in with their kind of music coverage.
I think that's an interesting consideration. You mentioned that kind of anti-PC kind of mentality that we talked about before.
Yeah,
I think because we've not got this deep into the 90s before, that kind of ingrained sort of almost kind of like drenched in irony misogyny that like really takes root like in the kind of like in the 2000s,
yeah.
like this is the sort of the framework for that.
And I don't want you, and I don't need you.
Okay, so the first thing I want to attempt to delve into this week from the Melody Maker is that absolutely cursed cover feature on the Coolest People in Rock 1999.
How many people made the list, by the way?
Well, this is the first thing I want to get into. The full list runs to 50 people, but we we don't have time. I'm going to be concentrating on the top 10. But because I wanted to try and avoid just turning it into a dunking session, I have attempted to approach this from a more objective point of view, which is why I will be analysing the top 10 coolest people in rock for a variety of statistical lenses.
I love it. I love it.
So, number 10, a new entry for obvious reasons. It is Cliff Jones of Gay Dad.
Cool as fuck.
More of more from whom later. Um, at number 9, another new entry. Uh, the most. This is the one that really made me go, "What?" The hardest. Number 9 is Dominic Chad. Okay, hazard a guess who Dominic Chad is?
I know. Who's that?
It's the guitarist from Manson.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, that's Manson, Mansun. Don't worry, we'll come back to them improbably. At number 8 is veteran of such lists. In fact, although he's listed as new here, which I don't believe, it's Brett Anderson from Suede.
Ah, okay.
Number 7, dragging the average age up, is Jarvis Cocker of Pulp.
Still cool in 1999, I see.
Yes, of course. Number 6 is famed Trump voter Huey Morgan from Fun Loving Criminals.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Number 5. Actually, just before I get on to number 5, I should point out that Huey Morgan from Fun Loving Criminals in the previous year's list was at number 42. So he has gone up 36 places in 12 months.
It's arguably the peak of the fun-loving criminal's career.
Well, arguably.
Famously, they were never popular anywhere outside the UK, right? Or Europe, I would say.
Yeah, that's right. They were like complete. I don't think their records even got released in the US.
Yeah. Hard to believe.
At number 5 from 16 the previous year is a man who's utterly synonymous with cool. It's Kelly Jones from Stereophonics.
Yeah, so far this has been a murderer's row of of cool.
Oh, we're just getting started. At number 4, it's fucking insane this band has 2 members on this list. It's Paul Draper, the vocalist from Manson.
Yeah, only 2, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I know. This should have been a top 4 lockout.
Numbers 5 through 1, it's just the members of Manson. There were 5 of them, right?
I've no idea.
Oh, Graham, a big clue, mate.
Getting into the podium positions now. Number 3, having ranked number 7 on the uncool list last year. That's uncool, not uncle.
Yeah.
James Lavelle's top 10 people of the year.
I thought they were just doing like the top 50 uncles. Melody Maker really getting desperate.
To fill those 48 pages somehow. Anyway, at number 3 is Brian Molko from Placebo. At number 2, up from number 9 the previous year, is your favorite Nicky Wire from Manic Street Preachers.
Oh, yeah, he's cool.
Couldn't even rise to it. And at number 1, up from number 4 the previous year, is Keris Matthews from Catatonia.
I knew it.
Yeah, there you have it. That is the top 10 coolest people in rock in 1999, according to the Melody Maker. Now
comes the insight.
So the average age of this list is a surprisingly old 29.2 years. The oldest person on this list is inevitably Jarvis Cocker, who's aged 35 in 1999. The youngest is a tie between Brian Molko and one of Manson, who are both 26.
Wow, that does seem old.
Yeah, it's like that's not young in my head.
Band age is like 23, 22.
Yeah, I should have taken. You know what? To run through it really quickly, like Cliff Jones is 31, which is to be expected. Dominic from Manson is 26. Brett Anderson is 31. Jarvis Cocker's 35. Huey Morgan is 30. Ignore my previous comment. Kelly Jones is the youngest person on this list at 25. Paul Draper is 28, Brian Molko 26, yep. And then Nicky Wire and Keris Matthews are both 30.
Okay.
A lot of these artists are quite deep in their careers at this point. Like Catatonia must be on album number 3. The Manics are on album number 5. Placebo are probably 3 albums in by this point. I don't know about Manson and Stereophonics. And yes, Suede are on about album number 4 or 5. Pulp have dozens of them.
It's funny because going through like late 90s Melody Maker, they were pretty hot on the Stereophonics. I mean, he's number 5 in their cool list. What was Mr. Writer all about? Do you know what I mean? If they're just picking and choosing the coverage they don't like at this point, I think. I had no idea that they were so beloved by the Melody Maker.
I didn't really pick up on that either, but I think it speaks to that like kind of final act of the Melody Maker that I was talking about earlier,
Yeah.
where they're kind of like, okay, fine, like shave all the edges off, narrow down the scope of what we do. Let's just focus on like indie rock
Yeah. Okay.
and rock in general. That's another thing when you break down my extremely rudimentary genre tags. 40% of that top 10 are what I would describe as inverted commas anthemic indie. So the sort of post Britpop thing. 30% of that list is bracketed as anthemic rock. 20% is pre Britpop or kind of proto Britpop. So that's Suede and Pulp, obviously.
Okay.
And then there's a single entry for what I have labeled as student funk, which is how I would describe fun-loving criminals.
Student funk, or it seems like too high praise.
I know, like the F word doesn't sit right with them. It's too interesting. I find them really hard to categorize. Anyway, so yeah, that is what the Melody Maker thinks is cool in 1999. And I guess the main point I am trying to make here is that you feel that in the coverage. I talked earlier about how in the news piece, like they're most comfortable when they're praising the Manics and kind of being sniffy about Lauryn Hill. I think it's either 98 or 99 when Melody Maker runs the infamous Craig David on the toilet cover,
Oh yeah.
slagging off UK Garage. There's this real kind of strain of like pro rock and anti kind of anything like dance, hip hop, black music related
Yeah.
that kind of embeds itself in Melody Maker over these last few years. There's a fantastic episode a few years back of a podcast by a bunch of ex-Melody Maker writers that I will reference in the show notes when we post this, which basically talks about, I think who was on there? There was Neil Kulkarni, Simon Price, a couple of other people, but they basically talked about like how fucking miserable they felt being at the Melody Maker as it took that like extremely conservative approach and just being totally disillusioned with it and kind of watching it deteriorate.
Wow, interesting. In which era? In this exact era, or?
Yes, in this exact era. From memory, they talk a bit about how kind of like Britpop sort of like sowed the seeds of its downfall. And then the post Britpop stage was just like a sort of, like a race to the bottom.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely that.
All jokes aside, I find the Manson thing crazy. I don't know anyone who liked Manson at that point in time. Yeah, I just don't really know what possessed them. If I was going to have some sort of read on this, like I get why someone from Gay Dad's in there because like it's the hype thing. You know you're going to want to keep it contemporary. The majority of the others I would describe as artists who might not have the widest possible appeal, but the fans they do have are like doggedly committed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like whether it's Manic Street Preachers, whether it's Placebo, whether it's Suede, like arguably at this point in their career, Pulp, these are all artists who, you know, they might not necessarily have the most consistently broad appeal, but the people who are into them will back them to their hilt.
Yeah. All except Catatonia, maybe.
Well, yeah, that's the anomaly. Like, I don't get like I think my theory is sound, but I don't understand how that leads to Catatonia being number one.
Would you class her as a ladette?
If it was 1999, yes. I don't know. I don't love that phrase, but I get where you're going. As a cultural frame of reference, she definitely fits in that like Sarah Cox getting pissed vibe.
Sarah Cox is interesting because there's a half-page advert for Loaded in the NME, and on the cover is Sarah Cox. So that's what made me think of it. So yeah, I think we're in the latter era. I think she kind of maybe she's like the indie version of that. Again, I'm not tarring her with that brush. I'm just saying, to kind of that was the moment,
Yeah, and that was part of how the group were framed at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was a touch of the sort of sleeper bloke configuration in
Mhm.
that even though some of that band are kind of very well established in the sort of like history of alternative Welsh music. This is in book I've talked about before, Brittle with Relics.
Okay, yeah.
It comes up in there. Even though that band are kind of, they've done their time, like they are kind of very immersed in alternative music culture in Wales. The framing of them was like, here's 3 or 4 blokes that you don't need to worry about.
Yeah.
And here's someone who's up for getting pissed with journalists and making like quite bold statements in interviews. And I don't say that to try and diminish Catatonia or Keris Matthews. I'm coming at that from the angle of what gets traction with the music press in the late 90s.
So you mentioned the uncool list earlier. Who's on the uncool list?
So the uncool list is as follows. Let's get this out of the way with. Number 10, we have Jerry Halliwell. Number 9, we have Ian Brown, who it's worth remembering is coming off his airlines air hostess bothering homophobic rants on planes. That would justify his inclusion. Number 8, and this just I don't really know why. It's Sophie Ellis Bextor.
Okay. I mean, they're just like, here's a pop star we find here. Oh no, she's not a pop star yet, is she?
No, no, like
Yeah.
she's still in the audience. This is basically the audience backlash.
Maybe this is like a nepo baby thing as well.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I never felt like that was a huge part of like any backlash at the time. It was more just like here's another thing to be sniffy about.
I just think anything we've learned from Melody Maker, and this is the really no slight on Sophie Ellis Bextor because obviously she's gone off to do things well and above this, but Melody Maker, they're slightly obsessed with these kind of D and E lists like indie stars. Do you know what I mean? That the NME
Mm.
wouldn't even touch because they were more concerned with the C and B list indie stars.
Anyway, onwards. Number 7 is Saffron from Republica. Number 6 is Steps, which is cheating because that's 4 people. Number 5 is Chris Evans. We are firmly past the Britpop stage now, clearly. Number 4 is Billy Piper. Number 3 is Noel Gallagher. Number 2 is Crispin Mills from Kula Shaker.
Okay.
And at number 1, in a beautiful full circle moment, is Marilyn Manson.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, they are really laying out there like, this is what we like and this is what we don't like. I mean, if I were them, I would be extremely cautious about throwing someone like Noel Gallagher on that list because I'm just like, you better have somebody coming up to replace him. And based on your top 10 cool list, it's slim pickings out there.
Yeah, like Manson are not going to answer your problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Just to briefly bang that kind of latent misogyny drum again.
Okay.
The top 10 uncool list breaks down as 4 solo female entries and one 50-50 if you break down the Steps membership. Girls making pop, boo.
Sweet, 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 Catatonia, I should have told ya. Sweet, 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 Catatonia, I should have told ya. And it was my fears in the back.
The next thing I wanted to talk about today is a half-page article on page 26 of this week's NME about the band Fridge. Fridge are promoting their second album, F, which is reviewed also in this issue by Piers Martin, who gives it an 8. The album has aged really well, actually. It's excellent. I re-listened to it over the weekend. Have you heard this album?
Not for years. But I've definitely bought it. One kind of, yeah, I won't spoil it, but There's obviously a catalyst for why I bought these albums.
Okay. Fridge were an instrumental post-rock band that had more of a foot in the electronic music world. It's funny, their first album, which I'd never heard, called C-Fax, which isn't on DSPs and was released on Trevor Jackson's Output Records, I listened to for the first time today. It sounds nothing like them. It's very rough and ready post-rock. It sounds like post-rock made by teenagers, basically.
That really surprises me as an Output release.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It did for me as well. I was quite surprised. Anyway, Fridge were a three-piece. Sam Jeffers, Kieran Hebden, who would go on, go on to find great fame under his Fortet alias, although he was already recording as Fortet at this point. And Ardem, I believe his surname was pronounced Ilhan, who would later record under the name Ardem. In the mid-aughts, both Fortet and Ardem would go on to be associated with a genre called folktronica, which is, as it sounds, like a blending the genres of folk and electronica. Arguably, I think Fortet has spent the last 15 plus years sprinting as fast as he possibly can in the opposite direction of that genre. But nevertheless, in the mid-aughts, it was a thing, and they were two big proponents of it. Actually, it could be a bit unprofessional here. I think enough time has passed to say that I worked with Ardem a few times on several kind of work for hire music jobs. I mean, I say I worked with him at a very junior position at the time because I was very young. So essentially, I was receiving his WAVs and laying them back to picture. The members of Fridge grew up in the same area of London at roughly the same time as one of my bosses, so they knew them relatively well. So the folktronica is relevant, as I heard possibly the greatest folktronica put down from someone that I worked with. This is something he said to Ardem when Ardem was pissing him off. In exasperation, he told him to go home and get his fucking spoons. Which is an excellent folktronica insult. Yeah. Anyway, back to Fridge. Enemy, traditionally, I would say, does not really know what to do with this type of music. This type of music, I think, is perhaps best summed up by a quote from Kieran Hebden in this article. It was hard to believe the enemy did not burst into flames with them printing this, where he says, lots of music's based on an idea of expressing yourself. We're not expressing our emotions exactly. We're more expressing our ideas about music. I wouldn't say our music is incredibly passionate in any obvious way. How far they've come in 1999 that a comment like that would go kind of unmentioned and they wouldn't be like thrown under the bus of pretension and non-feeling egghead music. Anyway, back to the review of F. In the review immediately under F, which, as I said, is well reviewed and gets an 8. There is a review of the ambient rock supergroup The Serpents album "You Have Been Poisoned." The Serpents had many members. Notable members include people who were in the Teardrop Explodes, Echo and the Bunnymen, Super Furry Animals, the Christians, and the critic John Savage was also in that band.
I have honestly never heard of that in my life before.
Yeah, me neither. I'm pretending like I knew all that before I read this, but this is based on my research. But what stuck out to me was obviously they referred to them as ambient rock, and they described them as indulging in exactly the sort of behavior we expected punk rock to eradicate. So that's the enemy that I know, not somebody basically saying they're making ideas first music. I think that is like a beyond parody summation of the enemy's attitude to kind of head first music. But I wonder whether Fridge's link to dance music, such as it is electronic music, is this kind of, if they kind of get a free pass because of dance music's kind of punk-esque arrival in the UK just over a decade ago at this point. Could be their youth, I'm not sure. Fridge made music with acoustic samples and recordings grafted onto an IDM template with kind of garnishings of jazz and avant-garde. You can't dance to it. You can't really chill out to it. This is what we would later call electronica.
My memory of Fridge is like it was not comfortable listening.
Yeah. I mean, this album actually is. It's a bit more straight ahead than some of their other stuff. I guess how I'm trying to frame it is it's something that we haven't really quite heard before, and something that would become quite dominant in the future. As I said, in terms of electronica, someone I knew at uni would characterize as kind of beard and spectacles music. Definitely got that kind of studious vibe to it. You could say, you can push back on this if you want, though never huge, this genre would come to dominate what we might broadly call left field music over the next decade. I think to say it starts here with this band would be to ignore a lot of music made in the 90s, most prominently post rock acts like Tortoise. But this is where post rock kind of blurs into electronic music. And then, let's be really, really real here. The trickle becomes a flood after the back to back releases of Kid A and Amnesiac by Radiohead. Two records heavily indebted to the scenes and genres that records like this sprang from.
I think there's a couple of things to pick up on there from my point of view. One is that I remember Tortoise. What's the Tortoise album with millions in the title?
Millions now living will soon be dead.
Yeah, like I remember that being championed by the Enemy around about 96, 97. That album was a big deal. There was also a remix 12-inch, I think. I think it was on Mowax, or had Mowax artists involved, that kind of introduced this idea that post rock was blurring into electronic music.
Also, the album TNT, which is from 1998.
Yes. And then Fridge felt very much like a continuation of that at the time. Like this quite uh, really interesting musically, but going back to that Kieran Hebden quote, like this quite austere, like analytical approach to music making.
Well, I'm interested actually. Sorry, I kind of raced ahead of myself there. I'm interested in what you think about my statement that, in terms of kind of, as I call it, left field music. You
Mhm.
know what I mean by that. We're not all the way into the avant garde. We're in kind of the wire territory, but we're straying into stuff that goes in and out of the mainstream. I feel like this genre was incredibly dominant in the aughts. I can't almost think of anything bigger than this in that world.
I was gonna use the Wire magazine as a frame of reference. This material like this, like and Tortoise for that matter, like they felt like gateways into that Wire magazine world. And I think a lot of it does get lumped under the kind of like post rock slash electronica sort of umbrella, but that does such a shit job of really kind of capturing the qualities of that music.
I also, this just seemed like a fascinating kind of just point in time to me where this music, it just does like a big shift. Sometimes, I could look at my CD collection around that period, of like the kind of mid-aughts, and think I owned nothing but electronica records that had like heavy folk influences. Do you know what I mean? That weren't necessarily out and out folktronica, but essentially were in this kind of quartet, Minotaur Shock. I don't know. I can think of whole labels that just had artists just full of this stuff.
Melodic leaf, like labels like that. Yeah, it's a tangent not to go off on, but like I've randomly bought an album like blind this weekend just gone because I heard someone playing it in a shop and it was this really filthy, transgressive sort of 80s dance music throwback. And I was like, I must own this. This is amazing. It's like a incredible soundtrack to bad decisions.
Okay.
And anyway, I got it home, and when I looked at the label, I was like, "This is on the leaf. Like, what the
Oh,
hell?"
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. Who's the artist?
Uh, the benefit of buying something blind is that your prejudices about an artist or projects they've previously been associated with don't get a chance to come into play.
Is it Marilyn Manson?
No, no, it's not Marilyn Manson. It is by Decius. And I bought Volume 2, Splendor and Obedience. And Decius, I'm not 100% up on who that is from a production point of view, but from a vocal point of view, all the heavy lifting is done by Lias Saudi from Fat White Band,
Oh, okay.
which came as a real surprise. I'll send you a link to it. It's fantastic.
No, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to. Yeah, Leaf is a good shout. I mean, I don't know whether that was just where my head was at in the aughts, but as I say, this just seemed to be absolutely everywhere, and I can't really think of. I mean, as I said, the not that this is in no way am I suggesting that Kid A and Amnesiac are folktronica records, but they are like the kind of if there's a trickle of this stuff from, let's say, mid 90s Tortoise up until Fridge, then there's like literally the floodgates open when like Kid A and Amnesiac come out. And then again, I'm not saying people heard those records and like, rush to make this type of music. But in terms of its profile,
I've got a slightly different take on it. So there's a couple of points to that. Part of that is that I think the Kid A Amnesiac doubleheader opens up experimental electronic music that is not intended for the dance floor to a much broader audience.
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
It's a bit unwieldy, but all of a sudden there are a lot of people like encountering kind of like Warp Records deep cuts and like Scam 12 inches
Yeah.
and album projects that would not previously have been part of their world.
Yeah, and as I say, sorry, an important distinction to make, as I said earlier, it's not only that you can't dance to it, it's also not ambient music.
Yeah, it's like, it's home listening music, to steal the old Warp AI comp tagline. So there's that aspect to it. I think another Fridge related project which really kind of like moves things forward is the second Fortet album, Rounds, where the folk influences come to the fore. Um, my take would be that the combination of Kid A and Amnesiac, like introducing these home listening electronic records to a much broader much broader audience, and at the same time you have Fortet kind of joining the dots between those sort of productions and folk instrumentation. That just seems to light a fire amongst a significant underground scene. So yeah, you talked about Melodic and Leaf, like those I have so many of those label samplers and albums in the kind of darkest recesses of my archive.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, I do think that stuff is quite a lot of the time it's quite accessible. There is a degree of melody to it that you might not find in the more austere.
Yeah. Tiger Beat 6. Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
But I mean, that's got the punk energy, which I think is a different kind of gateway. I think I know I keep on talking about Scam and Warp as if they're the only kind of obtuse electronic labels, but when I think of acts like Ortega and kind of Plaid and other sort of like very kind of conceptual, like dense electronic music, like that can be quite overwhelming. Whereas with the folktronica movement and also the Tiger Beat 606 stuff, you've got an on-ramp, if you like, whether it's kind of folkish melodies and instrumentation or whether it's that kind of like punky head rush thing in the case of Tiger Beat 6. Right, time has come. It's 1999, and that means that we must talk of Gay Dad.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew you couldn't wait for this. So, Gay Dad's debut album, Leisure Noise, takes the Album of the Week spot in Melody Maker this week with the tagline "Hype is important." It's reviewed by Mark Sutherland, who is the Melody Maker's editor from 1997 to its closure. Gay Dad is formed by a guy called Cliff Jones, more on whom shortly. They are signed to London Records after a brief bidding war before they released a thing. London Records releases their debut single To Earth With Love in January 1999, and it reaches number 10. So by the skin of their teeth, both Gay Dad and the A&R responsible for signing them are able to say their debut single went top 10. Cliff Jones is an interesting character and a much easier character to understand in a time of widespread internet access. At the time, there were allusions to kind of his industry background in the press. The real picture on that is that Cliff Jones was a Melody Maker writer in the early 90s before going on to write for Mojo and The Face In the Face in particular, he was an early proponent of the genre of Britpop and wrote very positive pieces on both Blur and Oasis in the early 90s, like circa 93, 94. So I think it's fair to say that, outside of label stuff, if you were Cliff Jones and you had been a keen observer of those sort of bands and that kind of movement, like you would have a pretty good idea like what levers to pull to start a bidding war between labels.
Yep, absolutely.
Anyway, going on to the album, I think this is a trope we've seen before, talked about quite recently in relation to menswear. Melody Maker's take on all this is, hey, it's pretty good. 3.5 stars.
Out of 5.
Yeah, out of five. Yes, out of five. It's pretty good. 3.5 stars out of 10.
Can I ask before you get ahead, and sorry, did you listen to the album?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, we'll come to that.
Okay, great. Can't wait for this.
So there are two quotes that stand out from the Melody Maker review. The first is that despite what you may have heard, this flashy, trashy debut is more than good enough. So if that's not being damned with faint praise, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And stick more than good enough on your CD case sticker.
Damn the critics, this album is competent.
um, and then like it does a full 180. And we get the quote, it's approximately 47 times better than almost every other debut album released this year.
In 1999, that I don't know, I'll go
I
on.
mean, I regret to say that I was up against the deadline to finish my notes, so I haven't had a chance to see who else's debut album came out in 1999. But you know, it's not a year any of us remember particularly fondly for music. Anyway, between those two quotes, you maybe get a sense of a certain lack of accountability from Melody Maker on just how all this hype got started, which I think I recall you saying about the menswear coverage we looked at previously, where it's like, has this gone too far? It's like, well, you're the ones who started it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, obviously, 1999, as we covered in our 1998 episode, the Great Rock Recession is upon us. After that debut single going at number 10, it's all downhill. So the second single, Joy, misses the top 10. I think it's the low 20s. The third single, Oh Jim, misses the top 40 by the skin of its teeth. A chance of 42, I think. And the chronology on this is a bit unclear, but their A&R man leaves London Records before the second album is finished, and so do they. But yeah, getting into the album itself from a bit more context. The album sessions originally started with Tony Visconti as producer. Tony Visconti, very, very well-storied producer, but I think the most relevant here are his work with David Bowie in the 70s,
Yeah,
and also his work with T-Rex. That makes complete sense to this album.
absolutely.
I mean, the fact they binned him off before they got started properly is surprising. But it makes sense, like even when the really overt glam rock influences like are toned down on this, like there's still that pre-punk kitchen sink arrangement approach you get from like kind of mid 70s ish, like British rock records. I think my overwhelming sense from this is that this is an album by a music journalist.
Yeah.
There's that quite well-known, semi-well-known quote that I'm going to butcher because I can't remember it exactly, from Steve Lamacq reviewing the first Primal Scream album, Sonic
Okay.
Flower Groove, where
Yeah.
he kind of coins the idea of record collector rock.
Sure, okay, yeah.
I think Steve Lamacq talks about like, kind of picturing Bobby Gillespie in the studio, like just completely paralyzed by like the weight of all the like bands and artists he worships.
Do you wanna know what's really interesting? Is I've read Steve Lamacq's autobiography, and he doesn't mention that at all in the whole book.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if he did. and I need to go and re-research that quote.
Okay, all right, sorry. Uh, Again, it sounds like I'm doing some kind of gotcha but
Yeah, I'm really paying heavily at the hands of the Inquisition this week. But no, like record collector rock is what comes through with it. It comes through when listening to the album. Do you? I mean, I don't know about you, but like the gay dad hype train was not something that was relevant to my life in 1999. Were were you conscious of it at all?
yes, I was. I was still reading the NME at this point. This is, I think, just a biographical detail that actually is quite noteworthy, is that I was still living the life that we were when we were kind of reading, like, these papers as teenagers, whereas you had gone off to London and were at university. I was still, I was still kind of dicking around in the town that I grew up in. I was still kind of quite plugged in. I actually owned, To Earth With Love. I bought that on single.
Okay.
Yeah, as a fallow 19-year-old. It seems embarrassing to say it out loud. This is like something you should have gone past, but it got a lot of MTV play, and I remember thinking it was pretty good, and then actually buying it and thinking, "Actually, no, I don't like this." But yeah, they seemed fun. That's how I
Mm.
remember them seeming fun. I didn't find him particularly obnoxious or irritating. It was which I think was like a big thing with people because he was quite a personality, but, I'd missed the whole contrived record industry aspect of it. That just sailed over my head. Maybe I was just too naive, but that is definitely something that gets mentioned in the when people are slagging them off in the letters page of the NME.
Yeah, the kind of like it's like a I'm not going to say an early example because it's a constant feature of letters pages, but the industry plant thing
Yeah.
is present and correct in an earlier form.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would say as well, I don't know if you're gonna mention this, but they get a pretty big sync with Joy in 2002. So it's a kinda like a bit of a Hail Mary at like, just after their career's over. I'm sure they got a nice, amount of money from that.
I wasn't aware of that. What was the sync?
For Mitsubishi. So yeah, they get that in 2002, and it's in FIFA 2000 as well.
Yes, I remember reading the FIFA thing. Not sure why I missed the Mitsubishi thing.
Yeah, I don't understand why that's stuck in my head all these years, but, yeah.
Anyway, getting back on track a little bit. This did not like enter my world at all at the time. Like to your point, like I was in London, my head was somewhere very, very different musically in 1999. So coming to it like like a blank slate now was a bit of a surprise. The thing that stood out most of all about the debut single, "To Earth with Love," was just how much it sounds like "Rock and Roll Star" by Oasis.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I think that sort of speaks to to their appeal to a degree at this point. There's a lot of contrived stuff going on, but there is also an element of kind of energy and glamour, which is in pretty short supply elsewhere.
You're not getting that from regular fries, that's for sure.
No, exactly. Like, but also like the kind of like the mainstream rock stuff. Like this is not stereophonics,
Yes, true,
like
yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination.
Sorry to jump in. Can I ask, if this album was released in 1995, how do you think it would have done, having listened to it?
I think it's maybe too much for 95.
Okay,
96
okay.
could be a goer. One of my there's another like kind of like upbeat sort of like glam rock influence track called Dateline. My description is science fiction glam skronk banger. That's what you'd expect of an older Supergrass. He really, really sounds like Gaz Coombs on Dateline. And there's like, like the production's like pretty full on, but it also fits with kind of, like, do you remember first single from the second Supergrass album, Richard III?
Yes, yes.
And it's like, oh right, they've upped the aggression a bit. It's like that, but it's kind of like it's got a bit of the Stooges in it. It's got a bit of almost like ELO sort of production in it. And those are the sort of highlights of the record. You've got the debut single, you've got Dateline, which is great. The absolute standout for me though is a track called Black Ghost. The best way I can describe it, and this is not gonna manage your expectations at all, like prepare for disappointment when you listen to it. But To me, it sounds like Grand Prix era Teenage Fan Club crossed with Summer Teeth era Wilco from a production point of view.
Okay.
Like, I was like, "This is fucking great." Like, straight away, like, on first listen, it's like, "What the hell is this?" Like, I need to know more about this song. It's also one of the few times that, like, Cliff Jones, like, sounds like a vocalist rather than someone performing his idea of what a rock band vocalist is.
Interesting. Interesting.
I tell you what, Melody Maker did not agree, citing, the burst balloon of Black Ghost as the only occasion where the album is truly bad.
Oh, okay. You'll have to take that up with
So
Steve Sutherland when you next see him. How dare you?
but perhaps I will.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the point I'm trying to land at is that apart from a scare, which I'll talk about shortly, I'm broadly pretty positive on this album. There's some pretty dull kind of urban hymns adjacent, like earnest lighters in the air stuff. Like the third single, "Oh Jim," like that deserved to not chart in the top 40.
Yeah.
Like, that's like someone heard Sonnet and was like, "Yeah, we can make something less offensive." The last 2 tracks kinda sag a bit, although that's better than my initial impression. So my initial impression was like, "This album's pretty cool," but then the second half turns into, like, Magic Pie-esque blues rock that lasts forever, except it doesn't. The problem is that on DSPs, it's the expanded edition, which sticks all the B-sides on at the end.
I saw that, yeah.
It would appear all the B-sides are these kinda, yeah, like, bluesy, sorta, like, sprawling Magic Pie numbers.
Wow. Maybe they heard Magic Pie on Be Here Now, but, they decided to form Gay Dad off the back of that.
We we should do a whole episode on Magic Pie.
Listen, I'm looking forward to, you know, eBay prices of the issue permitting. I can't wait to do our Be Here Now special. And yes, Magic Pie will be discussed in great detail.
In a spin-off episode of its
Yes.
own. Anyway, in conclusion, yeah, like, as you can probably guess, I did not hate this, and I say that as someone who went in with, absolute rock bottom expectations. I've listened to this pretty consistently since we locked in this episode.
Wow.
Most days involve a run through of the album, particularly after I realized, like, I could remove those B-sides. Um, like, I added that Black Ghost track I called out, to my sort of, like, regular rotation current playlist.
Wow.
We'll see if it lasts. I mean, to call it a lost classic would be a massive, massive overreach. Like, I cannot stress enough, it is not a lost classic. But as this kinda, like, symbolic last roll of, like, the Britpop hubris dice by a like, a major label,
Yeah. 3 years too late.
yeah, it's a very entertaining diversion. Final point, what is it with London Records and hype machines?
Yeah, right, yeah,
This
yeah.
is the same label that signed Menswear. And, like, a couple of years later, they're like, "Yeah, we'll take Gay Dad. We can make this work." And yeah, that is my unexpectedly sincere assessment of the Gay Dad album and its coverage in the Melody Maker.
I loved it. I loved every second of it. That was good.
Out of my time, trouble dream keeps calling on someone or something. Out of my mind, trouble dream keeps looking for something or someone to free me.
Next week, we travel back to 1992, where amongst other things, we will be discussing the state of shoegaze and Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine.
In the meantime, you can find us on the socials and most of the usual places. That's Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all under the Analog Slop name. That's all one word and spelt ANALOGUESLOP. However, if you prefer your podcasts to involve static pictures, we are also on YouTube. That channel is youtube.com at ANALOGUE slop. And finally, if you want to send us an email, we're reachable predictably on analogslop@gmail.com.